I come across way too many stories of children who are in about grade 4 and grade 5 who are not just exposed to it, but who are consuming it. And like I said, as we get into the details of why that's a problem, I think that you'll agree this is just terrifying. There is not a shred of credible evidence that indicates that pornography is appropriate, useful, or in any way positive in the lives of children.
Welcome back to On the Couch with Claire. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to important conversations. And today's episode is one that every parent, carer, and educator, I think, needs to hear. And we're talking about something that's a bit, I think, awkward for parents. It's definitely confronting. And let's be honest, I think it's scary. And that is kids and pornography. And the reality is that children today, your children, are being exposed to explicit sexualized content younger than ever. And I just don't think now as parents we can think, well, my child's only 8 years old. They're just playing a bit of Minecraft online. They don't see this stuff. They may be seeing this stuff, and it's certainly something we need to get on the front foot of. I think the material that's out there that is being exposed to our kids is violent, it's degrading, and most of all, it's completely disconnected from what we want them to be learning about, which is real relationships of intimacy and respect. And I see the ripples of this as a psychologist in my clinic every day in the way that boys think about themselves and their roles, the way they talk about girls, the way girls view their own bodies, and just this confusion, I think, that kids feel about their own identity and self-worth. So what do we do about this? How do we talk to kids about this? Parents out there are going to think, how on earth am I going to raise pornography with my 12-year-old son? How do we protect them without wrapping them in cotton wool? And how do we step into that role as parents? So to help me tackle this, I'm joined by someone I'm thrilled to connect with who's become a trusted voice for Australian parents, and that is Dr. Justin Coulson. He's a parenting expert, an author, a dad to 6 children. I love his books, and I have just seen that you have a wait list at the moment for a new one coming out all about raising boys, which is very timely. So we're going to dive in now to how porn is shaping our kids' view of relationships and all the practical things that we can do as parents. Dr. Justin Coulson, welcome to On the Couch with Claire.
I'm so glad to be with you, Claire. Thanks for having me.
No problem. This is a really confronting issue for a lot of parents. And I think, don't blame parents for kind of thinking, yeah, I know it's out there. I've got to deal with that at some point. How young are kids exposed to pornography? I saw some stats recently. It was shocking. It was around, is it 11 or what are you seeing about exposure and age?
The short version of this, I don't know. I don't know. And I think that anybody who tells you that they know is lying. Why? Well, from an ethical point of view, we can't go into primary schools and high schools and say, hey, how many of you are viewing pornography? When did you first see it? It's just no human research ethics committee at a university is going to give people permission to go and research this kind of a topic with young children. They're vulnerable, they're impressionable, they just don't want to go there. So what we do get ethics approval to research is from kids maybe 15 or 16 and above. So there's a number of different studies that are out there where that kind of approval is given. But essentially every study that you look at is going to be retrospective. We're saying to somebody, how were you when you were first exposed? And then we have to get into things like, was it intentional or unintentional? And then usage questions. The best data that we've got, and again, I don't put a whole lot of credence in it, but the best data that we've got seems to suggest that 11 is the average age of exposure. Just a quick reminder for people who haven't done year 7 or year 8 maths for a while. When we're talking about the average, that means 50% of people are older, 50% of people are younger. I'm worried about anybody viewing it full stop, end of story, and we'll get into why that is shortly. But when you look at the numbers and think, okay, if this number is loosely correct, 50% of kids younger than 11 are being exposed to pornography. We've got some research that indicates that kids as young as 5, 6, 7 are being exposed to it. Certainly, I come across way too many stories of children who are in about grade 4 and grade 5 who are not just exposed to it, but who are consuming it. And like I said, as we get into the details of why that's a problem, I think that you'll agree this is just terrifying. There is not a shred of credible evidence that indicates that pornography is appropriate, useful, or in any way positive in the lives of children.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, of that concept of the average, because I think if stats are put out there, like you said, we actually don't know, but if stats are put out there or media articles and parents are watching that or reading it and it says, the average is 11. Again, if you've got an 8-year-old, you kind of think, oh, okay, I've got a bit of time. That's the average. There are much younger kids and a lot of them exposed to it. So I'm glad you said that.
And when you say, how do you have this conversation with your 12-year-old? I wanted to interject right there in the intro and say, oh, you might be waiting too long, depending
Yes.
on whether you've got a boy or a girl and what school they're going to and what their friends are up to. Like you don't start raising a teenager when you're raising a teenager. You start raising that teenager when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, and you start having the tricky conversations from a young age so that they're natural and normal as they get older. Because if you've never had a conversation like this and you've got a 14-year-old and you're thinking, oh my goodness, now's the time. Well, better late than never. Start now, but it will be much trickier than starting younger. So I guess
Yeah.
the main take home, just out of this little snippet, is if you have young children, it's never too early to begin conversations about things like consent and intimacy and even pornography in a developmentally appropriate way.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into. I love that. I love that you don't start raising a teenager when you're raising a teenager. That's great. Where are kids being exposed to it? For those parents out there that think, well, I just don't know where they'd see it. Like, I'm with them all the time. And, like it is so widespread. But for parents listening, where are they picking this up?
Well, it doesn't take much of imagination to work it out if you put your mind to it. I think the real question is, do parents believe that their child would, could, and is going to consume it? And so the obvious answers are everywhere. The UK Children's Commissioner about 10 years ago issued a report, and the title of the report was basically Porn is Everywhere. They will see it on the school bus. They'll see it at school camp. They'll see it in the school playground. They'll see it in your living room. They'll see it in their bedroom. They'll see it at their uncle's house or at their friend's house. They'll see it at a sleepover party. I'm not saying that they're seeing it every time they go to any of these places, but they are going to have peers who have been exposed to it from about grade 4 onwards. It's unusual that it's younger, although it is younger. I mean, you talk to someone like Melinda Tankard-Reese and she'll tell you the horror stories. And those stories are real and devastating. I think that it's important to not terrify people, though, and just bear in mind that most people are seeing it as they get a little bit older. But I guess the other thing to highlight here is it's always been there, right? When I was a kid, you show up at a factory, right? Dad's got to go and run an errand, and you say, I need to go to the bathroom. And you go into the bathroom, and suddenly you're exposed to something there. So, I mean, there were 5, 6, 7-year-olds who were being exposed back then. The difference now is that it is prolific. It is literally in their pockets. It's in their hands all the time. And that, I think, is the great concern. That's the real worry for me.
And as you said, there are different ways kids can come across it, whether that's intentional by consuming it or accidental. I met someone many years ago who their child came across it from a very innocent perspective of they'd seen mum and dad kiss each other goodbye in the morning and grabbed the iPad and wrote people kissing. And I think that they were very little and were fascinated by that. And then, of course, went to image and video search.
Yeah, right. I had a chat with a mum just the other day, and she said, I'm just so upset. So that I don't know if you've heard that the shared nest style of co-parenting. So instead of kids being shuffled from one house to the other, the parents actually leave the child at home and they move out of the house for a few days so that the other parent can come in. Now, I don't know how you do that in practical. Like that to me shows a wonderful level of maturity and great co-parenting if you can have that level of stability. But the ex-husband had been in the home across the weekend. Mum had come back and it was late Sunday night. She was just organizing some dinner and she heard her 9-year-old daughter go, oh, like literally screaming. They have a computer. It's set up in the living room, full access for everyone. But dad had been on the computer, I guess, when nobody was home. He had been looking at explicit content. Daughter has opened up the computer and there's everything in living color right there in front of her. And she's a 9-year-old girl, right? So unintentional. But the concern here is that when children encounter pornography, while many of them are appalled and disgusted and feel icky and gross, it's also normal, natural, and frankly healthy to have a low level of curiosity, maybe even a high level of curiosity around this. And so being able to work with parents and work with kids and understand that this is not, it's normal to be curious. It's just not healthy to pursue it and to find out about it online. That's the great challenge that we encounter, right? Because once kids do see it, it creates this loop in their brain. They keep going back to it. The default mode network, that part of your brain that thinks when you don't have anything to think about, it keeps going there and thinking, well, what did I see? And trying to make sense of it. Trying to,
It's like it's almost compulsive, isn't it?
right,
Mm,
right. And it's
mm,
that whole thing. If I say to you, Claire, whatever you don't think of a white bear, the more you try to suppress it, the harder it pushes to get into your
yeah.
brain. And this is what happens to kids. So protecting them from it and having wise and sensible conversations at a developmentally appropriate level, just so important.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a few clients now and that's the loop they've been in, and it's been traumatizing and devastating for the child, but also devastating for the parent, as you said, that mother who said, "We do everything to protect the kids. I'm so devastated that they were exposed to in this way." And so sometimes you put the best things in place and it happens.
Right. And so that's the incidental, the accidental. But then, from a statistical point of view, and we do have better data on this than first stage of exposure, statistically, we know that the number one consumer of pornographic content in this country, and in fact, in the Western world globally, are our 15 to 30-year-old boys and young men. And some Australian data that I picked up from Professor Marshall Ballantyne Jones, he suggested that I think it was 84% of our 15 to 29-year-old boys and men are consuming at least
Mm.
weekly, and a huge portion of those are consuming it daily. So that obviously leads to a preponderance of pornographic problems.
All right. So for parents listening out there, and there's almost kind of the obvious answers of as you said, the instant reaction that children have of being exposed to this content that can be so extreme and quite frankly violent sometimes and completely removed to anything they'd seen before. But once we're in that kind of compulsive rumination about it and the exposure has been there, what are some of the impacts on developing brains, the psychological impacts of pornography exposure for kids?
Okay, so Louise Perry, who's the author of The Case
Mm.
Against the Sexual Revolution, she has explained that pornography normalizes styles of sex which tend to be really aggressive and degrading, particularly towards women. I've heard, I want to quote whoever it was, but I just can't quite remember where I heard it or who said it now. But I was having a conversation with somebody and they said, what was once fringe has now become mainstream. I think that the most obvious example of that would be, and I hate bringing this up, I really wish that I wasn't talking to you about it, but sexual strangulation, choking.
Mm.
This is the kind of thing that was once fringe. And now, if we look at data here in Australia, it seems that overwhelmingly we've got people who are, they're viewing something and it changes their beliefs. And
Mm.
once you've changed your beliefs or script, that means that when you have the opportunity to act it out, that's what you will do. When you're in an intimate situation, you believe that's what's appropriate. If the average age of exposure to pornography is, let's say, 11, let's go with that for now. That means that boys are going to be viewing explicit content at least 3, maybe 4 years prior to their first. I'm going to use the word sexual, and I'm using it really broadly. It could be kissing, right? Or it could be much more than that. But they're experiencing and viewing this content, they're ingesting it, they're marinating in it, they're internalizing its harmful scripts at least 3 years before they start to have any sexual experience, before they have their first kiss. And from that point forward, the script is kind of set. Their goal is that they have to perform, they've got to notch up conquest, they've got to do what they've seen. They believe that because they've internalized the message, they believe that this is what girls want because the girls seem to really enjoy it in the movies, right?
Mm.
And the girls believe that they're supposed to expect it because unfortunately they've seen it and heard it as well. In preparation for today's conversation, I wanted to share something that a mum sent to me. This was sent to me by a mum of a year 7 Victorian schoolboy. And this is what she said. She said, I'm a mum of a boy who was using his school laptop to access sexual content, and his behavior in life was spiraling. He was running away. He was highly agitated. We were losing control. The sexual nature of his behavior was terrifying us. We were desperately trying to work with the school. It was a private school. They owned the laptop. While we had everything in place that we could possibly do at home, he kept working around it. The school made us feel like helicopter parents despite his shocking behavior. The boundaries were far from efficient or effective, including making him write out rules and agree to do better. We asked for his laptop to be removed as he wasn't coping with it, and it was the source of our issues. They refused and said they couldn't educate him without it. Even during school suspension, he was allowed his computer and continued to defy and work around them. We were mortified. When we were asked to withdraw him from the school, They told us they'd never met a child like him and that he needed serious help. In the end, it was our greatest blessing. Within 6 weeks at our local state school, he's a different kid. They've got much better protections in place for preventing access to inappropriate sites. Plus, we own his computer and we have control of protections on his device. And she just goes on to talk about how boys aren't mature enough to control their impulses, to stay away from these destructive behaviors that are hurting their futures, as well as the girls that they're traumatizing. Fundamentally, I mean, I have so many stories for you, Claire, and they're heartbreaking. Maybe I can share one more quick one to highlight.
Please.
I wrote a book called Misconnection. It's a book about raising teen girls. I spoke to a grade 10 girl in one of my interviews, and she described something that happened to her in grade 5. Again, a direct quote. She said, I was sitting at a table finishing lunch. My friends had just left to play elsewhere in the schoolyard when 4 boys from my class sat near me. They mentioned my name, so they had my attention, and then without looking at me, they began talking about what I might have been doing the previous weekend. So within a couple of minutes of this, you know what it's like when somebody mentions your name and your ears prick up? She basically said that within moments, their discussion moved from whether she was riding her bike or going for a swim in the pool to describing what she was wearing, and then to describing sexual activities that they were guessing she might have been indulging in across the weekend. I want to highlight again, she was 10 years old. She was in year 5. And there was no reason at all for them to believe that this completely innocent girl would be engaged in anything sexual. And then the conversation shifted to next weekend, and the boys talked about how they hoped they could sexually engage with her and what they would like to do with her. Sorry, not with her, to her. So we're talking about 4 10-year-old boys who are casually discussing sexual fantasies about their classmate, just like they're planning a game of cricket or a catch-up at the movies. Now, I believe that this would have been almost, not entirely, but almost inconceivable before the age of internet pornography. But it's happening in playgrounds across Australia, I think, every single day of the week. I just, this is going on.
And that's horrific to hear. I mean, not just that she was 10 years old, but the boys were 10 years old. And you mentioned that pornography has always been there, and it has, but that's very different to stumbling across a Playboy in a bathroom to consuming regular video content,
Of
as you
sexual
said, that
stimulation and multiple
for
penetration.
years before, in that priming effect of 3 to 4 years of watching these videos. How could it not have an impact by the time you then have a sexual encounter?
Yeah, you might be familiar with Peggy Orenstein. She wrote Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex. And she said to me, if you as a parent are imagining 70s porn or 80s porn or even 90s porn, you're not getting what they're seeing.
No.
Her research shows, again, I mean, content warning, if you haven't figured it out already, this is really hard to hear. I interviewed her for one of my summits, and I'm using my interview in my upcoming book about boys. She said that boys are routinely viewing extreme content like, and I quote, rape, gangbangs, and violence. In fact, the day before we're recording this podcast interview, I came across an article in the Courier Mail. Now, it's not known for exceptional journalism. However, there are some things that they usually get right. And they were reporting on an elite boys' school in Brisbane where a bunch of year 9 boys, 20 of them in the group, were sharing around memes of rape. And they were making comments, degrading comments about it. We know that the Knox boys in Sydney, there was a big blow up about what they had on their Discord chat just a couple of years ago. And it's not just the elite private schools. I need to emphasize this is everywhere. One more quick thing that I want to highlight before we move on about what the research shows. So we do have data on this. Pornography, because it's rewiring beliefs and behavior, rewiring beliefs, which leads to a shift in intimate behaviors. I'm using the word intimate, like this is really intimacy. It's so far from intimacy. But here's what we know. Boys who view pornography become less likely to use condoms when they do have sexual experience.
Really?
They are much more likely to share explicit images without consent. They are more likely to engage in risky sexual behavior. They're more likely to engage in delinquent behavior and substance use because this is an impulse control thing to some level. We know that they're more likely to pursue casual hookups and one-night stands. They're also more likely to express intentions to pursue higher numbers of sexual partners. There is also research that shows that boys who consume pornography are more likely to endorse what's known as the rape myth. That is, that if she was sexually assaulted or raped, she asked for it. It's what she was wearing. It's because she is a girl. And there's also research that shows this is not just a boy thing. Girls who view explicit content experience decreased satisfaction with their body, a lower body image. They are more likely to find themselves in a relationship where their partner is critical of their body. And they often feel like there's more pressure to perform acts that are seen in explicit content. Oh, and interestingly, people who consume pornography seem to have less actual sex, which I think is
Mm,
fascinating as well. It's associated with increases in loneliness and decreases in sexual enjoyment. Like basically everything
mm,
you don't want for your children when they start to encounter and engage in sexual activity, everything you don't want, pornography promotes.
right.
Thing that you do want, it reduces the likelihood that they're going to get that. I mean, that's just
Mm.
awful.
Yeah, I think I've read and spoken to experts about the fact that once you start consuming it, it's almost like that desensitization of a drug. You need to go to more extreme lengths, and you end up stumbling down rabbit holes of more extreme material to be able to get the same shock value or impact and satisfy that curiosity. So naturally, you absolutely become desensitized to the material itself. And even adults, consenting adults in relationships who purport to kind of watch pornography to improve their own relationship. Research has shown that it actually doesn't. It actually does the opposite effect for them as well.
Yeah, it's a
So,
it's a really curious one. I know we're not talking about adult relationships, but just quickly on that, there is some data that shows that when it's consensual, when both are engaging, that it can. But I'm skeptical of the research around that. Like,
mm,
so, as a science researcher, it's really important to me that I report what the data shows. My concern with it is as follows. You do get a sugar hit, but there's an enduring sensitization process, right? And eventually
mm,
what did turn you on simply stops turning you on. We've all got experience with this because the first time we held someone's hand or the first time we kissed somebody, we were aroused, right? Like it's like, oh my goodness. But once you've been kissing somebody for 5 years or 10 years, you're no longer aroused the way that you were and you're looking for more. And so people who say, oh yeah, the pornography is great for my adult relationship, maybe you get a sugar hit. But I would be concerned about how that lasts. Anyway, that's not really the
mm,
my
mm. No,
conversation.
it's a really good point. Yeah.
There's one other thing that I just remembered while I was saying that, though, as we go back to the research on kids. There is some data, like it came out in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm going to say it's 2020 or 2021. There's a university study that found that compulsive pornography use is associated with either severe or extremely severe depression in students. Now, it's not saying that it causes it, but it's saying that it's associated with it. It may be that severely depressed people consume more pornography. It may be that consuming pornography leads you to feel depressed. But I think when you go through all the other things that we've just discussed, you can see how if you're having all of these negative outcomes and not getting the peaks, you're not getting the positives, you can see how that could be associated with an increase in depression. There's an increase in anxiety for a percentage of kids. There's an increase in stress levels for some. So essentially, I don't know any research that says, yeah, you should try it. It's good. And you should show it to your kids. You should let your kids.
Or even that it's just okay and not going to do harm.
Yeah, I had
You
one guy
know.
come up to me and he goes, "It's just boobs. I don't know what the big deal is." I'm like, "Mate, if you
Oh,
knew, like clearly you're not consuming it. If you knew, based on all the research that I've seen, all the conversations that I've had, it's not just boobs. Like,
it's not just boobs.
yeah, yeah, pull your
Yeah.
head in. It's not
Yeah.
just boobs. Yeah.
You've talked about the concept of boy code and societal expectations and social rules for boys. Yes, pornography's weaved into this, but as a general concept, do you think our boys these days are confused in what we, society or parents, want from them? Because I feel like on one hand, there are so many messages to them of to be strong in their masculinity and be strong males, and that's what society needs. And there are people out there talking in those lines. And at the same time, you need to be vulnerable and show emotions, and we want emotional vulnerability. And do you think they're just confused of where they land now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we've made a dead set mess of what it is to be a man. One of my favorite quotes, I'm using it in my upcoming book. There's a New Zealand political leader. His name was David Cunliffe. And in 2014, because there was a whole lot of sexual aggression and sexual assaults and family and domestic violence, and it was really in the news, he got up and he said, and this is a direct quote, he said, "I'm sorry for being a man. I'm sorry for being a man." And I just think we've got this really crappy, masculinity is breathtakingly ill-defined. It's really poorly defined. We're not good at describing what masculinity is. And so our boys have a really distorted view of what it is to be a man. They think that it's about dominance. They think it's about sexual conquest. They think it's about being stoic and never showing any weakness. In one conversation I had with a 14, 15-year-old boy just recently, I said, "What is it that makes you a man?" And he just said, "Oh, you've just got to look good." And I said, "Well, what does look good?" The word that I'm looking for, as soon as he said it, I was looking for something that pointed towards status because that's what boys are looking for. They think that manhood is about status. And how do you get status? Well, you get status by, there's actually, you mentioned the term the boy code. There's this thing called the boy code that a researcher at Harvard called Bill Pollock identified a couple of decades ago now. He wrote this landmark book called Real Boys. And what's amazing is this was done decades ago. He wrote the book in 1998 that built on work that had been done by a guy called Brannon back in the 70s. And we've still got the same boy code principles running around in kids' heads today. So here are the four elements that Pollock identified. And then I'll tell you what I think healthy masculinity is. Number one, Pollock and Brannon identified that to be a real man, to be a boy, you've got to be what they call the sturdy oak. So that's tough and stoic and self-reliant, which means that you've got to contain and control your emotions. In fact, ideally, you'll eliminate your emotions entirely. The only acceptable emotions that a boy can display are feelings of joy. Sometimes you don't want to overdo it, or anger. And so this is where we have things like man up and quit crying. That's the sturdy oak, right? They're the phrases that are most emblematic of what it is to be a sturdy oak. Just toughen up, princess. Stop your crying, drink some concrete, and harden up. The second one is what they call give 'em hell. So this is that aura of daring and aggression. This give 'em hell concept in the boy code means that I have to be really cavalier. I'm I laugh in the face of danger. Remember that great line from Simba? I want to say Simba. It wasn't Simba. What's the name of the Lion King kid? The little, was it Simba? It is Simba.
Yeah, it was Simba.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I laugh.
And he said, I laugh in the face of danger.
Yeah, that's right. So it's all about bravado
Yes.
and risk-taking behavior and proving your masculinity through confrontation or dangerous activities or telling a school teacher to F off, right? That's the give 'em hell.
Which biologically, you can kind of see where some of this comes from being pack animals talking about the Lion King. But, you know, you can kind of see where the status and bravado and bravery comes from of being top dog.
So you get the sturdy oak and you get give 'em hell, and they're a little bit different to top dog. They call it the big wheel, and that's the third one that I was going to mention. These things like the sturdy oak and the give 'em hell, they point in the direction of status. But the big wheel is actually, I need to have the power. I have to maintain a position of authority or superiority. This is where we start to get into the whole misogyny and patriarchy and men hating women kind of thing. I recorded a podcast myself just in the last few days. A mum from Melbourne, 7-year-old boy who is lifting girls' skirts, touching them inappropriately on the backside and on their chest. And I'm so sorry to say this, and sniffing their seats. And she's like, where does this come from? Why is he doing this? What do I do? And so I shared a bunch of things about what to do in my conversation on the podcast. But in terms of where does it come from, while I'm concerned about abuse and I'm concerned about access to pornography, another thing that I am concerned about is, does this kid have a need to demonstrate power? Is this the beginnings? And I hate saying it. I don't want to over psychiatrize a 7-year-old. Psychiatrically, I don't know anything about this kid, but this is real dominance-oriented behavior, superiority, authority. I need to look strong, and the best way that I can do that is to subvert the agency of others. Constant competition. And the last one, I've taken too long on this, so I'll quickly wrap up. The last one is no sissy stuff, which I think is probably the most constraining of all the pillars in the boy code, because to move from a boy to a man, a boy therefore has to reject anything that could be perceived as feminine or emotionally expressive, which means, as you were saying before, there's no vulnerability, there's no tenderness, there's no compassion, there's no emotion sensitivity. It's all got to be purged so that I can be seen as properly masculine. I mean, it makes me want to weep, this gender straitjacket that constricts boys' emotional and social development, and it casts a shadow well into adulthood. And here's the thing, people like you and I, and so many parents who will probably listen to this, we're like, yeah, but I'm not enforcing this boy code. You don't have to. The boys enforce it. They police it. They do it to one another. And to me, that's the great devastation. So how do I define masculinity? In this book that I'm writing about raising boys, I've had to come up with a definition that I can feel good about. And my definition is this: a real man is somebody who helps the people around him feel safer and stronger. And so from my point of view, that allows him to still be the man. He's allowed to have strength. In fact, to allow others to be their best version of themselves, you have to have the personal strength, the sense of identity, the belief in yourself, the confidence in yourself to let other people shine. You don't have to outdo them. You don't have to outperform them. You don't have to be a bigger man than them. You can actually be so confident in who you are that you can say, I want to see the best you've got. And I want to
Mm,
applaud you and congratulate you for being so amazing. That's what a great dad does, right? He revels in his child's successes and doesn't feel like
mm,
he's got to put them down or be better than. That's what he does with his wife or partner. He says, you are, I can't do this without you. You complete me, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
that vulnerable moment where he says, we are better together. So a real man shows up and says, I'm going to be a bonus in your life. Richard Reeves, who wrote Of Boys and Men, this book that revolutionized the masculinity world over the last couple of years, he uses the phrase surplus value. Didn't actually come from him. It came from an anthropologist called David Gilmour, who went and looked at all these tribes throughout the world. And what he discovered is that the real men, the men who were most celebrated and prized in the tribes, were the ones who went out and caught the elephant or the lion or the stag, or they brought home the fish, and they were generous. They added value to the tribe. They gave more than they took, and they looked for opportunities to downplay what they were doing
Yeah,
and,
brilliant.
and give generously to others. I mean, if we could teach that to our boys, to leave every
Mm.
person you interact with better than you found them, oh my goodness, we just wouldn't be talking. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm just, as you're talking, thinking about boys that we've seen in my clinic and ones, even current ones, teenage boys who I feel are desperate to feel something, but terrified to show it.
Yeah.
But I can just sense this desperation of it, that they really want to feel something and they come in a little bit kind of numb, but they're scratch at the surface and it's right there, but they're terrified to show it. Can you just tell me that definition again, Justin, of masculinity? I loved that.
Yeah, a real man, somebody who's moving from being a boy to being a man, is the person who shows up and makes the people around him feel safer and stronger. He's the
Mhm.
person who adds surplus value. He's a bonus. I've got six daughters, Claire.
Mm.
Six daughters. I'm raising my fifth 15-year-old right now. And my way of talking to my girls about this is, I want you to date and marry the guy who stacks the chairs at the end of the night. Look for
Yes.
the chair stackers, right?
Yes.
Look for the one who hangs around, is social and friendly, and then says, oh, there's a job here that needs to be done. Let me go and do that. That's
Mm.
the guy you want. Or the floor mopper, right? Because he's there even after the chairs have been stacked. But you look for the one who sees a need and fills it. To me,
Yeah.
that's the essence of the very greatest masculinity.
Brilliant. Okay, I want to move now to talking about, on a practical basis, the role that parents can play. For those listening and thinking, okay, what do I do? Because I think, like you, I'm very conscious not to parent blame. I've got primary school aged kids myself, and it is harder these days than previous generations in some ways with the insidious nature of this content and tech and the internet. And I think parents are overwhelmed. It's not that they don't care, but they don't know where to start. And, they feel like they're failing because the internet's gotten to the kids first. And so they feel like they're on the back foot continually, chasing rather than being on the front foot and leading and parenting. And so I suppose that comes back to your discussion. And maybe one of your first pieces of advice is to start early.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those parents out there that just think, I just will freeze at the concept of talking about sexualized content and pornography with kids, what do you say to them?
Can I answer that question after I make a quick reflection on what you
Mm,
just said? I agree with you. I don't think that we benefit by making parents feel worse
mm,
at all. The idea of parent shaming is not helpful. But over the last little while, I've started to shift just a little bit. I actually think we need to call out some really concerning behavior on the part of parents. Just the other day, I ran a parent workshop on the Gold Coast, and a GP came up to me afterwards and said, I need this so much. I can't wait to talk to so many families that come in and see me about what's going on in their lives. And he said that there are many parents who simply are not parenting. They think that by providing a room and a bed and meals and sending their kids off to school, that they are doing their job. We had a really fascinating conversation. This guy specializes in neurobiology and neurodevelopmental challenges and a range of other things that are really quite deep and profound that we really hit it off and had a great chat. We exchanged details, which I never ever do, but we exchanged details because I was so inspired by our conversation. And he texted me the next day and he said this, I've used a few of your tips from your talk and it's making a big difference already. Then he says this, it's crazy how many of these relationships out there are so strained because the parents just don't know how to be a parent. Quote, no, it's not okay that your 12-year-old goes out and has sex and vapes until 2 a.m. every night. Close quote. And then he just said, I can't believe I even have to say that out loud. And I'm encountering more and more parents who are not setting limits for their kids. I mean, you're asking me, how do you have the conversation? These parents aren't having any conversations at all. I literally spoke to a mum about a month ago who buys alcohol and, wait for it, cocaine for a
No.
17-year-old. So,
So,
and let me be really clear about this. This is an upper middle class family that we're talking about. Is this unusual? I pray that it's unusual. I really do. But the attitude of so many parents is, I remember what I was like when I was a teen. The kids are just being
they're
kids.
going to do it anyway.
They're going to do it
Mm.
anyway. And she actually said, they're going to do it anyway. I'd much rather them be doing it in my backyard than somebody else's. And I'd rather know what it is that they're doing and what they're consuming than have no idea. Now, let me be really clear. I'm not into parent shaming, but I'm going to do it right now. That is appalling. That is pathetic. It is not on. That's not what you've got. One job as a parent: keep your kids safe. If you're supplying, you are not keeping your kids safe. I don't care if it's happening in your living room or backyard or not. That's not safe. And it's the same
I
with
don't care if your kid's 17 or 43 at that stage.
that's
Like,
not to mention the fact that it's fully illegal, but
exactly.
but just the morality of it. I talk to parents regularly who are talking about their 14-year-olds who have got their boyfriend or girlfriend sleeping over, and they're supplying condoms because they want to make sure that they're safe. Again, I'm sort of lost for words a little bit. This is not developmentally appropriate. This
So
is
why has this happened? It's like we've taken concepts in the last 10 to 15 years of parenting that we needed to move from the parenting of decades past, of not having these conversations and being kind of authoritarian. And now we've kind of, it's swung completely the other way. Why are parents these days so struggling with boundaries? I mean, myself, I think that they, in some ways, as you said, a lot of it is middle upper class parents, sometimes I see, have consumed so much information. They are reading and listening to podcasts and on mummy blogs and on Facebook groups. And sometimes I think they get so anxious and paralyzed by, well, if I say no, or if I do this, or if I take something off them, and we're talking at 5, 6 years old, their self-esteem is going to struggle. They're not going to feel that they're loved. They're going to feel rejected. Anyway, they have all of these concepts. And I think sometimes parents come to me and I try and say, let's just try and reconnect with the instinct of parenting. They actually have no connection anymore of thousands of years of us doing this, of what instinctually, maternally or paternally do you think you should do right now when your child has defied you or done this thing? And 9 times out of 10, they're on the mark if we can get them to listen to that voice again. But they said, oh, but I read this thing. Oh, but I heard this person say, and they're so paralyzed by it that, as I said, boundaries have gone out the window. But maybe there's more to it than that.
we have a lot of information. I'm contributing to it.
But so am I. And that's what I say. I'm like, I'm part of the problem here.
But there's credibility, right? There's
Yeah.
credibility, and then there's mummy bloggers. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be on the record and say, if you're getting your parenting advice from TikTok or from Instagram or from a mummy blog, you're doing yourself a disservice. You've got to
Yeah.
find credible, reliable people. And just because there's somebody who says something really good, and maybe it is right, doesn't mean that there's something you should follow. Like, find the credible resources. Anyway, back to your initial question. The issue around sex, I'm going to get philosophical for just a sec. We've seen a decline in adherence to the institutions that once existed that helped us to make moral judgments. And we live in a postmodern world where morality is if it feels good, do it. And so long as you're not hurting anyone, it'll be okay. This is at odds with the very best research and what we know about well-being and happiness in life. So one of the mores that's shifted is that sex has gone from being something that's sacred to something that's recreational. There was a great article that I found from a woman by the name of Emma Wood on ABC's Religion and Ethics page. And she says this: let's begin with a thought experiment. Suppose you're at the house of an acquaintance for the afternoon. We'll call him Jack. Jack is in a playful mood. He wants to have a water fight with you, but you don't want to. But Jack pressures you, cajoles you, persists and keeps asking. You make it clear that you're not keen on the idea and you keep saying no. Time passes and it looks like Jack has dropped the issue. But then Splash. While you weren't looking, Jack has hit you with a water bomb and is now standing there with a grin on his face, hoping you'll retaliate. Looks like you're having that water fight after all. Did Jack do anything wrong by initiating the unwanted water fight? Perhaps. There was no consent. At the very least, what he did was annoying. At the worst, it was an inconvenience. But supposing that what Jack did was wrong, how wrong was it? Was it seriously wrong? Would you be justified in claiming that Jack violated you and that what he did was so bad that he deserves jail time for it? Probably not. The worst we could say is that Jack ruined your afternoon. What Jack did was a bit wrong, maybe moderately wrong, but not seriously or grievously wrong. Why not? Because it was just a water fight. Jack pressured you into a trivial, recreational activity that you and most people normally don't mind that much anyway. So the fact that he disregarded your wishes can't be that big of a deal. Now substitute water fight for sex, and we might begin to see why it seems unintelligible to so many young men today that sexual assault is a big deal. Young men have grown up in a culture that tells them that sex is a recreational activity with no deeper significance. Unsurprisingly, then, young men have come to internalize the idea that initiating unwanted sex is on par with initiating an unwanted water fight. It's just a bit of fun and nothing that any reasonable person should get too upset about. Now, obviously, the analogy only goes so far, and I know that there will be some people who hear this and are offended by it, but the central point remains, and I think it's a strong one. If sex is recreational and people are pretty comfortable with hooking up on one-night stands and sharing their bodies, then the unwanted nature of it shouldn't cause the furor that it causes. It's only because there is something sacred about sex, something deeply personal and private about sex, the sharing of your body, that it literally changes it from recreational to sacred. But our community, our society, and particularly the world that pornography has created, which is the world that we are living in, that world actively teaches precisely the opposite to the sacred nature of it. Now, I know sacred has a whole lot of religious connotations and there's morally laden elements there, but sex is morally laden. And when we pornography our world and our children's lives and strip the morality out of it, we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised that this is such a challenge. It's not okay. I'm not saying that it's okay, but I think that we've lost the right to say, oh my goodness, how did this happen? Where did this come from? We've literally created a world that promotes it, shares it, encourages it, facilitates it. You've got the Jeffrey Epsteins, you've got the Sean Coombs, and you know what happens? You get onto news.com.au and all you see every single day, and I consume the news daily because I'm looking for podcast content and I want to be making sure that I'm speaking in relevant ways to parents. Every single day, you'll see another story about an X-rated OnlyFans performer making millions and sleeping with 100 guys or 1,000 guys in a day, or going to hospital because of their crazy sex stunt. The news media is full of this, and we wonder why in a sex-saturated, pornographied world, our children are having a hard time with things like consent and boundaries and pornography. Sorry, that's my rant. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Oh, no, it is. And I hear that. And I'm putting myself in parents' kind of shoes, listening to this, going, what hope have we got? What hope have we got when it's all around them? But again, I come back to you saying, well, there is things we can do and we can't abdicate our responsibility for those boundaries. And like many listeners would know of now, Jonathan Haidt says we very much underprotect our children in the online world, overprotect them in the real world, don't let them walk up the shops, but then allow them to come home and sit in a room with the complete access to the world, and not even in their room, walk around with it in their pockets without, I suppose, making conscious decisions of how you want to parent and not rely on the fact that, well, everyone else has got access to this or everyone else is doing this. So, what hope have I got? You have to carve out those boundaries within your home and decide how your home is going to operate as opposed to others. Yeah, look, if you could give parents a practical thing that they could do tonight, and I suppose that will vary hugely on the age of their child, perhaps, but let's talk to parents who are not sure if their child has been exposed to any of this. So we're talking pre-teenage years. And I think, well, they seem fine, but they're in primary school and latter half of primary school now. Where should they begin?
Silence is the problem. Silence is our biggest challenge. Silence is our biggest problem here. So where should we begin? I don't actually really care. We just begin. Let me step it out for you, though, and give you some scripts and some ideas. First off, it might not be tonight. And I know that you've said tonight, but I just want to emphasize some people will have listened to what we've talked about and gone, oh my goodness, the sky is falling and I do need to do something about it now. What I would do instead is I would just take a breath, pause, consider when's the best time to have a chat with my child about a sensitive topic. It might be Sunday morning. It doesn't have to be tonight.
I love that. So we don't have to pick them up this afternoon from school and grab them in the car. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to.
Seatbelt on. We're having a conversation. This is going to be a long drive, kids.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Talk to your partner at home, husband, wife, sit, think, breathe. Yep.
I mean, just on that, the whole talk to your husband, wife, partner. I'm an ambassador for the federal government's Consent Can't Wait campaign. And one of the things that we've discovered through research there is that adults don't talk to other adults about what consent is. Like, we're not talking to each other. So we actually have a talk to your child's other parent and say, hey, I've listened to this podcast. I feel like we need to have a chat with our kids. Choose the right time. And then when it comes to setting it up with your child, I'd be doing something like this. I'd be saying, hey, I want to talk to you about a really tricky thing. You might even think it's a bit awkward, but we need to have a really important conversation. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not in trouble. I just realized that I haven't talked about some stuff that's really important. And I know based on what grade you're in at school that you guys at school are probably talking about it. So I've got this milkshake. I've got this ice cream. I've got this bag of goodies. Like, bring them in with something enticing. Make it comfortable. Don't do it inside. Do it outside. And don't do it across the table. Do it side by side. Little things like that to take the pressure off. Being in nature. There's something about being outside rather than being surrounded by the four walls of your home. Those kinds of things make it better as well. I would not recommend that you do it in their favorite cafe and in a public place. I'm not convinced that's going to be the best place for this chat. But then literally just say, hey, I listened to a podcast the other day about pornography. And it got me thinking, I've never talked with you about it. And your child is going to look at you and that jelly baby that they're chomping on is suddenly going to, like, they're not going to chew anymore. They're going to be like, oh my goodness. And then you actually lead with questions. Don't lecture. Invite discussion. And the best conversation is the one where you ask questions. So you might say something like, have you heard of pornography? Now, if you're talking to a grade 5 or grade 6 child and they say no, they're lying. Like they're lying. So hopefully they'll tell you the truth. And if they say no, you can say, well, I find that really challenging to believe, but if you haven't, I'm really grateful. I want to tell you what it is. And here's a really simple definition. Pornography is images or videos or even written word or audio, where people are describing sexual anatomy or sexual activity in a way that's designed to make you feel something, like to feel something sexual. And then the conversation continues. Do any of the kids at school ever talk about pornography? Has anyone that you know encountered it? What have they told you about it? Again, you're not in trouble. It's normal. People are curious about it. Like you're constantly reassuring them.
Yeah.
And start nice and wide at school, friend group. What about you? Have you ever come across anything like that? Because when you start softly and gently, it's like the frog in the boiling water. It's getting warm in here, not really noticing, oh my goodness, now it's hot. But they're not jumping out because you've led into it really gently. Keep those treats going, whatever it takes. But I would also recommend that you keep the conversation short, no more than 15 or 20 minutes, preferably 10. And the conversation begins with exploration. I call this the 3 E's of effective discipline. Begins with exploration. You're asking questions. You're making them feel really safe. Then you get to a point where you might need to explain a couple of things. I'm really nervous about you coming across it because if you do, it can harm the way you think, the way you feel. It can harm your interactions with others. Keep your explanation short, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Otherwise, they just think you're lecturing them. And then you move to the 3rd E, which is empower. Okay, so we explore, we explain, and then we empower. Empower is where we say, so if you were ever to come across it, what would be the best way forward? Like, what would you do? How would you act in a way that doesn't create embarrassment for you, but keeps you safe? And so that now you're moving to problem solving. The very best discipline is actually about problem solving. It's about being adaptive. It's about being flexible. It's about finding a way forward. And what you're doing here as well is you're pre-arming your child. So you're getting in before it's happened, ideally, and you're giving them the opportunity to go, what would I do? Which means that when they encounter it, they've had the chance to do a dry run with you. They've already thought it through. They know where they're going to go. For me, that's going to be your ideal way forward if they haven't seen it. If they have seen it, you let them know that you're really glad that they were honest. No, you're not going to get them in trouble. And you just want to thank them. And at that point, you highlight how to make you feel. I would expect that they'll say, I felt a bit icky, but I was also pretty curious. They may not use those words. They may struggle to tell you how they felt. They may be really scared, and you can let them know you're not in trouble. Everyone does see it. Eventually, everyone's going to see it. You're not in trouble, but I want to know how it made you feel when you saw it. Can you describe that? Explore, 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 and then explain. I'm worried that you've seen it because it's associated with all sorts of bad outcomes. You might even reassure them. I'm really glad that you did feel a bit gross, and it's totally normal that you felt curious. And then you move on. So how do we protect you from this, right? What do we do? And then it's the same thing, explore, explain, empower. You're looking for solutions so they don't encounter it again. You want them to come to you. You want to set up appropriate limits. You want to make sure they know how to get away if somebody's trying to show them that stuff. That's where we're leading in these conversations. That was a lot. I hope that's not too.
Oh, no, that's so great. That's such great advice. And I think for parents that I see, they skip over too quickly that explore stage. And I think that they go in equipped with, oh, I have to tell them the answers and what to do and the dangers and then fix it. And actually, you don't know, like any topic, not just pornography, of how do I talk to my child about an impending divorce or something. Find out what they know first, because then that's going to influence what you tell them, right? So go in and spend a lot of time just figuring out, what do you know about this and where did you see it? And lots of exploration. Don't skip that part. But also, I love the fact that you've said, sit side by side is my takeaway. Outside, go for a little walk where they can look down and kick the dirt and avert their eyes if they need to. And have it short but kind of semi-regular, right? We don't need an hour and a half sit down once.
No, one and done doesn't come up with this.
No.
You're absolutely right. Like, this should be a recurring thing.
A check-in.
I want to share a personal experience from recent times with one of my kids. It's not about pornography, but it is about the way that a boy can be breathtakingly disrespectful to a girl. And I also hasten to add, girls can do this to one another and to boys as well. This just happens to be a boy. The boy has got a crush. Oh, well, he's dating. They're like 14 or 15. The boy's dating this girl who's the same age, and one of the friends has been interfering a little bit and sharing some stuff that's going on with her mum. This is the message that the boy sent the girl. And I'm not a swearer. I don't use coarse language, so I'm just going to use the initial letter of that word, okay? Because I'm just not that guy. He said, honestly, Zoe, you're just a F-wit. Stop telling this person's mum S. It's not my fault you hate me. You're just a lippy C. Shut your mouth and move on. Why don't I go tell your mum everything you do? Just stop trying to ruin me and this other person's relationship. Just F off and go put your S on some other poor kid. So I'm watching your face and I'm writing this book about boys right now, and I'm like, I'm just not going hard enough, because this is how they talk.
This is how they talk.
My daughter was telling me about the way that he was texting her, and I said to her, would you, with permission, get a screenshot of what he's saying? Because I want to use this in my book, and I want to highlight to parents there's some pretty disrespectful attitudes going on. I'm out here doing respectful relationships workshops in schools, and I'm going, oh my goodness, I need to go way harder, because these kids are just nuts. But back to the point about the whole, how do you have the chat? My daughter got the photo. She passed it on to me. I'm using it, obviously, as content to talk to parents about what kids are saying and how they treat each other. The casual brutality, the staggering disrespect.
And the normalization of
The normalization of
completely normal way to talk to each other.
But I said to my daughter, can I explore a couple of things with you about this? I actually used the word, can I explore this with you? And she said, okay. I said, when you see a guy talking to a girl like that, how does it make you feel? And she said, oh, Dad, it's terrible. I said, but tell me more. Let's go deeper. How does it make you feel? If you were in a relationship with somebody and they treated you like that, what would you do? And so again, I've got some very clear feelings about this, right? I want to go to my daughter and say, whatever you do, avoid him. Stay away from anyone like this. You deserve better. You deserve respect. This is atrocious. That's what I want to say. I want to protect her and say, life can be better than this, and relationships don't have to look like that. But instead, I spent 5 minutes just asking her, how does your friend feel? What's going on in this group? What's going on in this relationship? Where does he feel that he can treat people like this? How does that make you feel? And so lots and lots of those questions. And at the end of it, I've done all this exploring. And then I just said, I'm really worried about you being in any kind of relationship that looks or feels like this. That's my explanation, right? I've explored, now I'm explaining. And then I empowered her. I said, if this happened, what would you do? Or if you saw someone behaving like this, how would you engage with them? And so I'm inviting her to have this dry run to work out what's the standard that I will accept and what isn't. And as she shared her ideas, and she said, "Oh, Dad, if somebody treated me like that, I'd block them. I'd walk away. I wouldn't be in the same room as somebody if they were treating me like that. I'm not going to accept that." And I was like, okay, all right. So I'm doing my job. But what are these other parents doing? Again, not to parent shame, but for crying out loud, be a parent, because this is not okay. It's just not
Mm.
okay.
And a parent not just of the child using that language, but a parent of the child who receives it
Oh,
and
totally.
doesn't stand up to say, I don't tolerate that.
But again, you don't start parenting a teenager when they're a teenager. My daughter's willing to talk to me about this and show me these
Mm.
screenshots, right? Whereas these other parents probably don't even know that these conversations are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Justin, I think that's a really nice way to finish it off with practical advice for parents. We could go into all sorts in terms of what society needs to do on a legislative level and a community level. But as far as speaking to individuals today, what I love about your work is that it does bridge research with the real world. And it also tells parents what to go and try and do rather than just continually saying, don't do that, don't do that, which I think parents do hear a lot of as well. Now, we could cover a lot of things on this topic. Is there anything else, though, Justin, as we wrap up, that you'd like to talk to parents directly about today?
Oh, I wish that we could talk for like another 14 hours. I've got days of material that I'd love to share and ideas. But yeah, there's something that's been niggling at me the whole time. We're talking about kids, pornography, screens, disrespect, consent, all these things. I just want to talk about healthy childhood for a second, because we get so caught up in the awfulness that our children, the cesspit that our kids are swimming in. I had a dad reach out to me a little while ago. Sydney, 14-year-old boy, suicidal, just falling apart. And he said, we're getting professional help. It's not making any difference. I just don't know what to do. So we sat down and had a bit of a chat. I rarely get to have these kinds of talks because I usually talk to large audiences, but I just said to this guy, I don't want to do therapy with you, and I don't want to step on the toes of all the people that you're working with. You've clearly got a team around you, but let's just go a bit deeper. And he talked through a range of things that were deeply troubling. And I just said to him, here's what's at the foundation of a healthy childhood, and here's what your son is not getting. He needs something to look forward to. He needs deep relationships. He needs physical activity. He needs less screen time. And I said, if you can give him these four things, that would make a huge difference. Let's map this out. I said, I want to talk specifically about your relationship with him. This dad had described how busy he was and how he missed time with his son, but it's just been really hard. And I said, is there anything that you guys do? Do you go fishing? Do you go camping? Do you go mountain bike riding? Do you go surfing? Like, what's your thing? And he said, well, I love to mountain bike ride, and so does my son, but I don't want to push it on him. Like, I want him to choose to do it. I said, so push it on him, like, invite him. I said, what would it look like if you guys made a commitment to at least once a month, maybe even once a fortnight, go away for a night, stay somewhere fun, whether it's in a tent or a hotel, I don't care, but go away for a night and go mountain biking the next day and spend the day on the trails. What would that look like? Could you do it? Because now we're building a relationship, we're getting nature, we're minimizing, it's incompatible with being on a screen, and he's being physically active. I said, is that something that you could look at doing? And he said, yeah, I mean, I'd love to. And there's no reason that we can't. We're in a position where I'm fortunate. I'm in the luxurious position where I could make that happen. I said, okay, I want you to do so long as your son's consenting and on board with it, I want you to do it for the next couple of months. Come back to me and tell me how you go. We exchanged details. I got an email from him just about a week ago, and he said something along these lines. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but he basically said, I've got a new son. I've got a
Wow.
new son. He said, we can't wait for our next adventure. He's talking to me about it. We go out, we ride mountain bikes. I'm getting him to invite his friends along now. We buy pizza when it's all over. We're watching YouTubes about mountain biking. And he said, I feel like I've got my son back. And it's like we worry about all this stuff, and we rightly should. It is really concerning. But fundamentally, if we can get our kids out of the house doing things incompatible with screens, if we can get them being physically active in nature with people who love them and who they love, we're going to find that they'll get all the modeling, they'll get all the well-being, they'll get all the stuff that they need so that they can thrive and flourish. And the conversation that we've had today, while it may still be a bit of an issue because they will associate with people who aren't getting this, we're going to find that our kids are going to have the resilience to push through the hard stuff and make the kinds of decisions that psychologically healthy people make.
I think sometimes, Justin, people are almost disappointed maybe when the advice I give them is sometimes seemingly simple.
You mean
And
there's not a pill for this?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. And I do a similar thing and I say every day get outside, every day get your jollies, as I call it. Have a couple of laughs every day. Meditate, but meditate doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged. It could be out for a surf. It could be out for a mountain bike. It could be making a cup of tea. It's a meditative moment off a screen and connection. And so sometimes it's like, oh, yeah. And they're almost a little bit disappointed that there's not something else in the toolbox. But if they do it, and you weren't even asking daily then, I mean, that was a once a month to twice a month commitment for a
Right.
couple of months to get a new child. That's incredible.
It's just beautiful, isn't it? Staggering.
Yeah. And so it's a really good reminder that we don't have to, well, we can directly attack all these issues and confront them, social media and pornography and so forth, but we can counter them also by introducing other healthy things.
Correct. Yeah. Sometimes we need to take away, sometimes we need to add.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think parents forget about the adding these days.
Or we're adding the wrong stuff, right?
Mm.
We're adding the wrong stuff. But fundamentally, healthy lives create healthy psychology, and our children are much more likely to thrive. They're just going to be stronger. I look at the healthiest kids that I know, psychologically healthy, I mean, they're the ones that have got the great relationships. They're the ones that invest in those relationships. And it's really hard when you've got children who don't want to do that, but my goodness, what a difference it makes. Anyway, that's my favorite story right now.
I love it. I love that. Just as I said, it bridges that research to the real world. And yeah, it's not just about combating this is tough parents, but it's about being smart about what really works actually and what kids need. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. We'll have to have you back on, but thanks for joining me today.
That was great fun. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks. Thank you so much for giving up your valuable time and joining me today on the couch. If today's conversation spoke to you, consider sharing the love and send it to someone you know who needs to hear it. Don't forget you can watch this full episode on my YouTube channel. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, all I ask is that you hit that subscribe button. It helps us to be able to deliver bigger and better content to you absolutely free of charge. If you've got comments or questions about today's episode, head on over and come hang out on Instagram where you can follow and contact me. Okay, stay curious, stay connected, and join me next time on the couch. Take care. Okay, for those who've made it this far, just remember, even though I am actually a registered and qualified psychologist, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional individual advice.